Assassination of Jesse James by the killer Robert Ford, 2007. This film has a very poor reputation. It cost a lot of money and bombed massively at the box office. So this is, say, $80 million to make, and it grossed about $10 million. My expectation was that it would be long, boring, ponderous, no fun at all, and above all else, pretentious. Brad Pitt and the writer-director Andrew Dominic made another movie after this called Killing Them Softly, which I think was probably 2012. And it was, I didn't mind it so much, but someone else said that it was really, really, really bad. He really hated it. And the movie definitely had its pretentious elements. So this just has a really off-putting reputation. Some people have said, oh, it's a good movie, but I just had no desire to ever watch this. I have had access to this movie for, say, about 14, 15 years. It has been sitting on a shelf. I have had access to it and I have never been tempted by it at all. So what happened was I watched a movie called The Long Riders from 1980, a Walter Hill western, and it's got Jesse James in it. And at the end, spoiler, Jesse James is shot dead, and the character who shoots him dead says, "I am Robert Ford and I killed Jesse James." And of course, well, this movie comes to mind. So over a few days I decided, okay, let's give this movie a shot. And so I did, and I'm quite glad that I did, because the movie is actually much better than its poor reputation would suggest. It is a lot more watchable. It is not a pretentious Tree of Life style Terrence Malick arty-farty, who cares about the audience, let's just polish our great big massive filmmaker egos with this big bloated pretentious up its own backside piece of crap. This is a real proper movie that acknowledges that the audience exists and is here to be to some extent entertained, and we're not all here to worship at the altar of how great the film director is. So it's a rather talkative movie. The movie lacks any big action sequences. It brings to mind slightly Heat, which I think is an overrated movie. Heat is a talkative movie, or at least it's not full of action from start to finish. It's a long movie, but it has a few action set pieces that are really impressive and get people excited and get people to talk about the movie. Decades later, people are still talking about those big action scenes. This movie essentially only has one big action scene, and it's near the start, and it's a train robbery, and it's not flashy, it's not exciting, it's just a straightforward, unspectacular sequence. I mean, it's well filmed and everything, I'm just saying it's not in your face, full of flashy technique. Although it does have some interesting horror movie style imagery of the bandits, the robbers, at the side of the railway tracks with white masks over their face with holes for their eyes. It brings to mind Friday the 13th Part 2, the way Jason looked in that movie when, before he had the hockey mask, Jason wore a white mask with one eye hole. And so the train passes past all these robbers with the white face masks, and the lights are flickering on their faces. For a moment, there's some very strong horror movie imagery there. So this movie lacks a big action sequence to make people talk about it. what it really has is lots of scenes of people talking to each other. Some of them are quite tense. The other movie that comes to mind is There Will Be Blood from 2007. The interior scenes, more specifically, when people are in tense conversations and the way it's filmed visually and just the intensity sometimes did bring to mind some of the scenes from There Will Be Blood, which was also made in the same year, 2007. The running time is long. It is about 160 minutes, which is more length than it really needs, but it presents another world, another socio-economic world which is long gone. It's so, it brings to mind the movie The Day of the Jackal, 1973. Now, stick with me, this is a big stretch, but it did bring this to mind. There is a scene that just like blew my mind because it is all pre-computer, in which the authorities have their bureaucracy on paperwork and inside filing cabinets, and they have all these different analog pre-computer systems for organising vast amounts of data, and they have to search through it quickly to find information to track down the assassin in the movie The Day of the Jackal. And there's a scene when I think it's a police officer on a motorbike goes around to all the hotels and picks up the paperwork, the slips of all the guests, and he takes it back to like the central bureaucracy place that deals with that information. And later characters have to, like 10 or 20 people in a room have to go through all this hotel room paperwork trying to track down the assassin. And as I say, it's just so bizarre. I can't comprehend the idea of this large bureaucracy working without computers. Well, this movie is pre that. This is going way back, well before computers. And so again, it's like, it mildly blows your mind just a smidge just to think of it's just not a modern world. The law and its reach, and how justice is dispensed, how outlaws can live and hide their identities, things like this are just, it's a different thing altogether, and the movie deals with this subject matter to some extent. It does not ignore it. So the movie presents another world, and therefore there's quite a few redundant subplots or scenes that are not 100% essential to the plot, but I would not point to them and say they really should have cut this. This movie could have been 105 minutes, or this movie could have been 2 hours. The 2 hours 40 minutes with credits running time, it is long, but I think it is earned. There is enough content. It doesn't feel stretched. It's not taking the piss. It's not just long and epic for the sake of it in order for them to make a big epic movie that they can then boast about and go, hey, look, we made a big massive movie. I think the running time is mostly earned. I do not look at it and see anything that's actually worth cutting. The movie is the right length. Yes, it could be shorter, but I do not think the movie would be better at a shorter length. The movie would simply be shorter, not better. And you would maybe miss some detail. There's also I wouldn't call it the clan system, but there's the relationships between the cousins and the different branches of the families, and that's very important. So if you were to cut the cousins and their various squabbles, which might not be essential to the plot, but it is all part of the rich social tapestry that the movie is presenting, and is very important to the whole overall purpose of the movie. So yes, it is long, but I think the running time is earned, and I don't think the movie would benefit from being any shorter. I thought the movie was quite good. I did not love it. I did not think this is a great movie. It's not some unsung masterpiece. And if you're not into westerns, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think you would get anything out of it. But it's certainly much better than The Long Riders, which was perfectly decent, but much more superficial and just a very average movie. Whereas this is a bit more elevated, a bit more substantial, and the filmmaking's really good. After all, it brings to mind There Will Be Blood, which is a masterclass in great filmmaking. So that's a good association to have. So I liked it, but I didn't love it. Would I recommend it to people? I would. If you like westerns, you really should give it a shot. The movie's nowhere near as pretentious and as slow and ponderous as its reputation probably suggests. It is very talkative. There's not much action in it. In fact, there's almost no action. If you're looking for cheap, straightforward thrills, then no. You would be better to stick with Clint Eastwood movies, for example. This is a bit more thoughtful than that. There's a bit of rumination on, the value of a man's life. What was it all worth? Brad Pitt gives a good performance in which he, kind of struggles a bit with what he has become. I would give this movie 7 out of 10. It is not an art movie. Casey Affleck is an actor I have found to be quite off-putting in the few movies I have seen. There is something about him that I find unconvincing as a Hollywood actor. His voice, and I know I'm not one to have a leg to stand on when saying this, his voice is just not what I would expect from a professional actor. But he was good in this movie. Certainly, if you were to ask me for what is Casey Affleck's best performance, I would point to this movie. But then again, there's an awful lot of his movies I have not seen, such as the one he won the Oscar for, which is Manchester by the Sea. The film has not gained a reputation over the subsequent years, and I think that is because it lacks big action sequences that people would get excited about and therefore talk to other people about, because it's really just a bunch of people sitting around or standing around houses or walking around farmsteads or walking through woods having discussions. People can't get very excited about it, and they can't go to each other and say, oh, do you remember that really cool robbery scene? Or do you remember that really cool bank robbery? And therefore the movie falls between the cracks and doesn't really get discussed, and therefore it doesn't gain a reputation over time for being a really cool, interesting movie. It has not developed much of a reputation over time.